Galar was a moon forgotten by time. Its surface, a barren expanse of jagged rocks and swirling dust storms, lay beneath the perpetual twilight sky. Its craggy plains stretched endlessly, silent and desolate, save for the howling winds that swept across the rocky terrain. This was a place where hope came to die, where the unwanted and the forsaken were cast away, left to wither in obscurity. But on this forsaken moon, a faint, pitiful sound broke the silence. A series of weak, anguished cries that echoed through the canyons and ravines. The source of the cries lay in the shadow of a crumbling cliffside, where a small albino dragon, barely a hatchling, curled in agony. Its scales, which should have shimmered like polished ivory, were covered in grotesque clusters of barnacle-like parasites, each one burrowed deep into its flesh, feeding off its lifeblood. The creature's crimson eyes, dulled by pain, blinked slowly as it let out another feeble whimper. It had been abandoned, left here by those who deemed it unworthy. In the galactic archives, albino dragons were rare, but their differences made them undesirable among their own kind. Considered weak, fragile, and aesthetically imperfect, this hatchling had been discarded like refuse. Now, the parasites that had infested its body thrived, each one a tiny dagger of torment. The galaxy had turned its back on the creature, and now it awaited death. But fate had other plans. Not far from where the dragon lay, an old mechanic named Jorvi trudged through the rocky landscape, his grizzled face set in a permanent scowl. His steps were slow and deliberate, worn boots crunching against the dust-covered ground. Jorvi was a man who had seen too much, done too much, and regretted almost all of it. His reputation preceded him. Once a brilliant mechanic known for building and repairing the most advanced starships, he was now a pariah. Whispers followed him wherever he went, stories of his failures, his betrayals, and the catastrophic accident that had cost hundreds of lives due to a mechanical malfunction he was blamed for. The galaxy never forgot. Jorvi had been cast out, finding refuge on Galar, where no one cared who he was or what he had done. He was here for one reason only: to scavenge. The debris fields surrounding the moon often yielded scrap parts from ships that had strayed too close to Galar's gravitational hold. Jorvi survived by salvaging what he could and selling it to the few traders who dared to stop by this desolate place. But today was different. As he climbed over a ridge, his ears caught the faint sound of something unusual. He paused, listening intently. It was faint, almost drowned out by the wind, but it was there, a cry, not mechanical. Not human, something else, something in pain. Jorvi frowned, glancing around. Curiosity gnawed at him, though he tried to push it away. He didn't need distractions, he didn't need to care. But the sound persisted, pulling at something deep within him, something he thought had long since died. Damn it, he muttered under his breath and followed the sound. It didn't take long to find the source. When he spotted the dragon, his breath caught in his throat. He had seen many things in his time. Creatures from the farthest reaches of the galaxy, machines more advanced than most could comprehend. But this was different. The dragon's white scales were marred by the grotesque barnacles clinging to its body. Its eyes, though dulled by pain, held a flicker of life. Jorvi felt an unexpected pang in his chest. He crouched down slowly, careful not to startle the creature. "Hey there," he whispered, his voice gruff but gentle. "What the hell happened to you, huh?" The dragon let out a weak whimper, its body trembling. Jorvi could see the parasites writhing beneath its scales and winced. He had seen mechanical infections, systems overridden by malicious code, but this was suffering on a level he couldn't ignore. "Who the hell would leave you out here?" he muttered, reaching into his pack for a small scanner. The device hummed softly as he ran it over the dragon's body, and the results made his stomach churn. Millions of parasites, each one digging deeper into the creature's flesh. Left untreated, it wouldn't survive much longer. Jorvi stared at the dragon for a long moment, conflict raging within him. He could walk away. It wasn't his problem. He owed nothing to anyone, let alone a creature the galaxy had already abandoned. But as he looked into its eyes, something in him cracked. "All right, kid," he whispered, gently brushing his fingers against the dragon's head. "Let's get you fixed up." The dragon's eyes fluttered shut, trusting the stranger without knowing why. And for the first time in years, Jorvi felt something he thought he had lost forever: purpose. Jorvi's workshop was a cluttered mess of wires, tools, and half-assembled machines. The air smelled of engine oil and burnt circuits, a comforting aroma for the mechanic who had made this place his reluctant home. He gently laid the dragon on an old metal table, careful not to aggravate its wounds. The creature's breathing was shallow, each exhale a soft whimper of pain. A lump formed in Jorvi's throat as he observed its fragile state. He had seen ships on the brink of destruction, machines torn apart by war and time, but none of that compared to the delicate life now lying before him. Rolling up his sleeves, determination settled over him like a shroud. "Let's get to work," he muttered, reaching for his tools. The parasites were relentless. Every attempt to remove them caused the dragon to shudder, its body writhing in pain. Jorvi gritted his teeth, whispering soothing words he didn't know he still remembered. "Easy, kid, I got you. We're gonna get through this." Hours passed in a blur of concentration and exhaustion. Jorvi's hands moved with practiced precision, using tools meant for machines to delicately extract the parasites without harming the dragon's fragile flesh. Sweat dripped from his brow, but he didn't stop. He couldn't stop. By the time he removed the last parasite, the dragon was barely conscious, its body limp from the ordeal. Jorvi sat back, running a hand through his graying hair. "You're a tough one," he whispered, admiration in his voice. He cleaned the wounds, applying a soothing salve he had crafted from salvaged medical supplies. As he worked, he spoke softly, more to himself than to the dragon. "You remind me of me, you know, broken, forgotten, left to rot." The dragon's eyes fluttered open, watching him silently. Jorvi chuckled softly. "Yeah, well, guess we both got lucky today." Finishing the final bandage, Jorvi leaned back in his chair, exhaustion weighing heavily on him. Yet, despite the fatigue, he felt something unfamiliar, a spark of hope. He didn't know what tomorrow would bring. The galaxy was a cruel place and they were both outcasts. But for now, they had each other. And that was enough. The soft glow of a single overhead light flickered intermittently in Jorvi's cluttered workshop, casting long, jagged shadows that danced across the walls. The albino dragon lay curled in a corner, its breathing steadier now, though its body still bore the marks of its suffering. The salve Jorvi had applied worked slowly, soothing the raw wounds left by the parasitic barnacles. Its eyes, once clouded with pain, now glimmered faintly with curiosity, watching the man who had saved it. Jorvi sat at his workbench, methodically cleaning his tools. His scarred, calloused hands, shaped by years of mechanical labor, moved with a gentleness that felt foreign even to him. The silence between man and creature was almost comforting, a fragile thread of understanding weaving itself into existence. Every now and then, he glanced at the dragon, and each time a strange warmth spread through his chest, a feeling long buried under layers of regret and bitterness. The dragon shifted, letting out a soft rumble that wasn't quite a growl, but not yet a purr. Jorvi chuckled, shaking his head. "You talk more than most people I know," he muttered. "Not that I'm complaining." Setting down his tools, he leaned back, arms crossed over his chest. "I reckon you need a name," he mused aloud, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Can't keep calling you kid." He rubbed his chin, stubble scratching against his fingertips. "How about Asher?" The dragon blinked slowly, as if considering the name. Then, to Jorvi's surprise, it let out a soft, approving huff. "Well, I'll be damned," he said with a grin. "Asher it is." The moment was short-lived. A sharp beep from Jorvi's terminal shattered the fragile peace. His grin faded, replaced instantly by a wary scowl. Pushing himself up, he muttered curses under his breath and made his way to the terminal. The screen flickered to life, displaying an incoming transmission. The signal was encrypted, but Jorvi recognized it immediately. "Of course," he growled, "can't even have a day of peace." With a reluctant sigh, he accepted the transmission. The screen filled with the image of a man with sharp, angular features and piercing blue eyes. His expression was cold, calculating, and unmistakably smug. "Jorvi," the man drawled, "it's been a while." "Not long enough, Vexar," Jorvi shot back, leaning against the wall with a look of disdain. "What the hell do you want?" Vexar's smirk widened. "Straight to the point, as always. I heard an interesting rumor, something about a certain albino dragon found on Galar. Quite the rarity, don't you think?" Jorvi's jaw clenched. "Don't know what you're talking about." "Don't play coy with me," Vexar sneered. "I know you have it, And I know what the galaxy will pay for something that unique. But more importantly, his eyes darkened. I know what the consortium would do to get it back. Jorvi's blood ran cold. The consortium, the galactic powerhouse that controlled trade, law, and life itself across countless systems. They had no regard for individuals, only what could benefit their endless thirst for power and profit. And an albino dragon, especially one as young and vulnerable as Asher, would be a prize beyond measure. "Leave it alone, Vexar," Jorvi warned, his voice low and dangerous. "Oh, I don't think so," Vexar replied smoothly. "I'll be seeing you soon, old friend." The transmission ended, leaving Jorvi staring at the dark screen, fists clenched tightly. Turning to Asher, who was watching him intently as if sensing the shift in the air, he muttered, "Looks like trouble's coming our way, kid." Asher let out a soft growl, the faintest flicker of blue flame licking at the corners of its mouth. Jorvi couldn't help but smile grimly. "Good. We're gonna need all the fire we can get." The night on Galar was eerily still. The usual howling winds had quieted to an unsettling silence. Jorvi moved through his workshop with a sense of urgency, gathering supplies, fortifying doors. His mind raced with plans and countermeasures. But deep down, he knew the odds were against them. Vexar was relentless, and if he wanted something, he wouldn't stop until he had it. Asher watched him silently, the weight of the coming storm settling over them both. Watched him intently, its crimson eyes flicking from Jorvi to the various tools and weapons scattered across the workshop. The dragon's body, though still healing, had grown stronger in the past days. Its scales shimmered faintly in the dim light, and its wings, though small, stretched experimentally from time to time. "We have to move soon." Jorvi muttered to himself, "Can't stay here, not with them coming." He paused, glancing at Asher. "Never thought I'd be running for something other than my own skin." The dragon let out a soft chirp, almost amused, and Jorvi chuckled. Yeah, guess you're stuck with me now." The terminal beeped again, but this time it wasn't a transmission, it was an alert. Jorvi's heart pounded as he checked the display. Unidentified ships entering Galar's orbit. Too many for coincidence. "Damn it," he cursed. "They're early." He grabbed his blaster, strapping it to his side, and turned to Asher. "We gotta go, kid? Now." Asher, sensing the urgency, spread its wings and let out a determined growl. Jorvi opened the hidden hatch at the back of his workshop, leading to an underground tunnel system he had built for emergencies. As they descended, the ground above them trembled with the distant sound of ships landing. "They're here," Jorvi whispered grimly, "but they ain't taking you." The tunnels were dark and narrow, but Jorvi knew them well. He led Asher through twists and turns, each step taking them farther from the surface. But the echoes of footsteps and voices followed them, growing louder with each passing moment. Vexar's voice rang out through a loudspeaker, dripping with mockery. "You can't run forever, Jorvi. Hand over the dragon, and maybe I'll let you live." Jorvi grit his teeth, gripping his blaster tightly. "Like hell," he muttered under his breath. At the end of the tunnel, Jorvi opened a hidden door that led to a small landing pad where his old ship, the Ironclad, waited. But as they stepped out, they were met with blinding lights and the sound of weapons charging. Vexar stood there, flanked by armed mercenaries, his smirk wide and predatory. "Going somewhere?" Jorvi's mind raced. He raised his blaster, but before he could fire, Asher let out a deafening roar, flames bursting from its mouth in a brilliant wave of blue fire. The mercenaries scrambled, some diving for cover, others firing wildly. "Move, kid, move," Jorvi shouted, seizing the moment and pulling Asher towards the ship. They sprinted up the ramp, and Jorvi slammed his fist onto the controls, sealing the hatch and firing up the engines. The Ironclad roared to life, lifting off as blaster fire pinged against its hull. Vexar's furious voice echoed through the comms. "This isn't over, Jorvi." As the ship broke through Galar's atmosphere and into the vast expanse of space, Jorvi leaned back in his seat, breathing heavily. Asher curled up beside him, its body still trembling from the encounter. "We made it," Jorvi whispered, running a hand through his hair. "But this is just the start." Asher let out a soft growl, pressing its head against Jorvi's side. Jorvi sighed, a bittersweet smile on his lips. "Yeah, kid. We'll fight together." And as the stars stretched out before them, Jorvi knew one thing for certain. No one would take Asher from him, not while he still drew breath. The hum of the ironclad's engines resonated through the cramped cockpit as Jorvie stared out at the endless expanse of space. His fingers hovered over the worn controls, muscles tense with the weight of their narrow escape. Every flicker of light on the radar, every faint blip on the scanner, felt like the harbinger of their doom. His heartbeat pounded in his ears, not from fear, but from the gnawing uncertainty of what came next. Beside him, Asher stirred, its alabaster scales catching the faint glow from the console lights. The young dragon let out a soft, rhythmic hum, an almost comforting sound that seemed to echo the pulse of the ship. Its crimson eyes, though heavy with exhaustion, never left Jorvie's face. There was trust in that gaze now, a silent understanding that transcended words. Jorvie sighed, leaning back in his chair. "You know," he muttered, "I didn't sign up for this." He chuckled dryly, shaking his head. "Hell, I didn't sign up for much of anything after." His voice trailed off, but Asher's soft growl brought him back from the abyss of old memories he fought to bury. "Yeah," Jorvie whispered. "I guess we're stuck with each other now, huh?" The dragon blinked slowly, almost as if it agreed. Jorvie's fingers danced over the controls, bringing up the star map. The blinking dot marking their location felt like a target painted on their backs. Vexar wouldn't stop hunting them. The consortium wouldn't let go of something as rare and valuable as an albino dragon, no matter how young and vulnerable it was. They needed somewhere to hide. Somewhere the consortium's influence couldn't reach. His eyes settled on a distant system, a cluster of asteroid fields and derelict stations known as the Serpent's Drift. It was a lawless stretch of space, filled with smugglers, scavengers, and those who had nowhere else to go. The perfect place for someone like him. And now, for Asher. "Hold tight, kid," Jorvie muttered as he punched in the coordinates. "We're heading into the drift." The ship surged forward, stars stretching into streaks of light as they jumped into hyperspace. But the weight in Jorvie's chest didn't ease. It wasn't just the consortium that worried him, it was the whispers in his own mind. The ones that reminded him of every mistake he had made, every life lost because of him. He had been running from those whispers for years. And now he had something to lose again. The jump was smooth, but the moment they emerged from hyperspace, Jorvie knew something was wrong. The Serpent's Drift sprawled before them, a chaotic expanse of asteroid belts, ancient shipwrecks, and abandoned outposts. But it wasn't the landscape that made his gut clench, it was the ship waiting for them. A sleek black cruiser hovering amidst the wreckage, its hull reflecting the faint light of distant stars. Jorvie's breath caught in his throat. Not consortium, something worse. "Pirates," he hissed, immediately diverting power to the engines. The ironclad groaned in protest, its aging system straining as Jorvie pushed it to its limits. The pirate ship sprang to life, its engines flaring as it gave chase, weapon systems lighting up. Jorvie barely managed to veer away as the first blast shot past them. Asher let out a sharp, anxious growl, its claws digging into the metal floor. "Yeah, I see 'em," Jorvie snapped, adrenaline surging through his veins. "Hold on." The ironclad weaved through the asteroid field, dodging debris and incoming fire. Jorvie's hands moved instinctively over the controls, every maneuver a desperate attempt to stay one step ahead. But the pirate ship was faster, more agile. A blast rocked the ironclad, sending alarms blaring. Sparks flew from the control panels, and Jorvie gritted his teeth, fighting to keep the ship steady. "This is your captain speaking," Jorvie growled through clenched teeth. "Brace for a rough ride." Asher let out a low, rumbling growl, and Jorvie glanced at the young dragon, an idea forming in his mind. It was risky, reckless even, but it was all they had. "All right, kid," Jorvie muttered. "Time to see what you're made of." He slammed the controls, opening the cargo bay doors. Asher's eyes widened, realizing what Jorvie was asking. "Go," Jorvie shouted. Without hesitation, Asher spread its wings and launched into the void. The cold vacuum of space didn't faze the young dragon as it darted through the debris, weaving between asteroids with an agility no ship could match. The pirate ship hesitated, momentarily caught off guard by the unexpected sight of a dragon in open space. That moment was all Jorvie needed. He spun the ironclad around, targeting the pirate ship's exposed flank. His fingers hovered over the weapon controls. The ship's arsenal was limited, barely enough to hold off a scavenger, let alone a well-armed pirate cruiser, but Jorvie wasn't aiming for the ship. He fired at a massive asteroid looming above the pirate vessel, striking a weak point in its structure. The asteroid cracked, splitting apart, massive chunks breaking off and crashing downward, down onto the pirate ship, crushing its hull under tons of rock. Jorvi let out a sharp breath of relief as the pirate ship's systems flickered and died. "Now, where's my dragon?" he muttered, scanning the void. A flash of white caught his eye. Asher soared back toward the ironclad, its crimson eyes gleaming with triumph. Jorvi grinned, opening the cargo bay doors just in time for Asher to glide back inside. "Hell of a first flight." Jorvi chuckled as he sealed the doors and powered up the ship's engines. "You did good, kid." Asher let out a soft chirp, curling up beside Jorvi's chair. As the ironclad disappeared into the depths of the Serpent's Drift, Jorvi couldn't help but feel a glimmer of hope. They had survived today. But the galaxy was vast, and danger was never far behind. Jorvi knew their fight was only just beginning. The Serpent's Drift was a graveyard, hulking remains of ships, long-forgotten battles, and debris from centuries of conflict floated aimlessly through the void. Jorvi piloted the ironclad through the twisted maze of wreckage, each piece a silent reminder of the galaxy's brutality. Asher lay curled up beside him, its breathing soft but steady. Jorvi reached down absent-mindedly, running his fingers over the dragon's smooth scales. The bond between them was growing stronger with each passing moment, and Jorvi found himself caring more than he ever thought possible. "Can't believe I'm babysitting a dragon," he muttered with a wry smile. Old Jorvi would have laughed his ass off. The dragon opened one eye, letting out a soft rumble that almost sounded like amusement. Yeah, Jorvi chuckled. "Laugh it up, Scales." His smile faded as the radar flickered. "Movement. Already?" he whispered, eyes narrowing. A small ship, barely more than a shuttle, drifted through the wreckage, its lights flickering erratically. It wasn't a threat, but something about it felt off. "Let's take a look," Jorvi muttered, steering the ironclad closer. As they approached, Jorvi's eyes widened. The ship was damaged, its hull scorched and punctured. A faint distress signal flickered on his screen. "Survivors?" Jorvi whispered. He hesitated. Helping meant risk. Risk meant exposure. Exposure meant the consortium could find them, but he couldn't turn away. "Looks like we've got company, Asher," Jorvi sighed. He docked with the shuttle, grabbing his blaster as he made his way to the airlock. The door hissed open, revealing a young woman with wide, terrified eyes. She stumbled forward, collapsing into his arms. "Help," she whispered. Jorvi's eyes hardened. "Looks like trouble just found us." The soft hum of the ironclad's engines was a distant murmur as Jorvi paced the narrow confines of the ship's main corridor. His mind raced, thoughts tangling into knots of uncertainty that tightened with every passing moment. Asher, now nestled in the cargo bay, watched him with keen crimson eyes, sensing the tension in the air. Though still healing, the young dragon was more alert than ever. Its lithe form coiled like a spring ready to snap. In the medbay, the young woman Jorvi had pulled from the drifting shuttle lay unconscious, her breathing shallow but steady. Her torn flight suit bore no insignia, no identification, just the remnants of a life lived on the edges of the galaxy. Jorvi leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, studying her with wary eyes. "Who the hell are you?" he muttered under his breath. Asher let out a low rumble. "Yeah, kid," Jorvi said with a faint, tired smirk. "I'm wondering the same thing." Hours passed like the slow drip of a leaky pipe, each second stretching into eternity. Jorvi busied himself with repairs, deft fingers adjusting circuits and welding damaged panels. But his thoughts kept drifting back to the stranger in his medbay. He had survived this long by trusting no one. And now, he was harboring not just a rare dragon, but an unknown human whose mere presence could spell disaster. A soft groan pulled him from his thoughts. Jorvi straightened, wiping his hands on a rag as he stepped into the medbay. The woman stirred, her eyes fluttering open. She blinked against the harsh light, gasping as she tried to sit up, only to wince in pain. "Easy," Jorvi said gruffly, raising a hand in a gesture of peace. "You're safe for now." Her eyes darted around, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings before locking on to him. Where am I?" she whispered, voice hoarse. "The ironclad," Jorvi replied. "My ship." She frowned, confusion flickering across her features. "Who are you?" "Jorvi," he answered simply. "More importantly, who are you?" The woman hesitated, gaze shifting, calculating. Lyra, she finally said. Lyra Kane. Jorvy's eyes narrowed. The name meant nothing to him, but that didn't ease his suspicion. What happened to your ship? Lyra exhaled shakily, running a hand through her short dark hair. I was running. From what? Jorvy pressed. The consortium, she whispered, her eyes darkening. They were after me. Jorvy's heart skipped a beat. Of course. Why? Lyra hesitated, then met his gaze. Because I stole something. Great, Jorvy muttered, rubbing his temples. And now you've brought them right to my doorstep. I didn't have a choice, Lyra snapped, then winced, clutching her side. I didn't know where else to go. Jorvy let out a slow breath, forcing himself to stay calm. What did you steal? Lyra's lips pressed into a thin line. Data. Top secret. Something they didn't want anyone to see. Of course it's data, Jorvy grumbled. Why not? A soft growl from the cargo bay drew their attention. Lyra's eyes widened as she spotted Asher for the first time, freezing, eyes locked on the dragon. Is that? Yeah, Jorvy interrupted. That's Asher. And now, thanks to you, both of us are on the consortium's hit list. Lyra swallowed hard. I'm sorry. Sorry ain't gonna keep us alive, Jorvy replied grimly. We need to move. He turned to leave, but Lyra's voice stopped him. I can help. Jorvy paused, glancing over his shoulder. How? I know how they operate, Lyra said. I've seen their protocols, their patterns. I can help you stay ahead of them. Jorvy studied her for a long moment, then sighed. Fine, but if you even think about double-crossing me. I won't, Lyra promised. I swear. Jorvy nodded, though doubt gnawed at him. Trust was a luxury he couldn't afford, but right now he had no choice. The ironclad sliced through the void, weaving through the labyrinthine asteroid fields of the Serpent's Drift. Jorvy sat in the pilot's seat, hands steady on the controls, eyes scanning the radar. Beside him, Lyra worked over the outdated console, fingers flying as she overrode systems and rerouted power with surprising precision. You're good, Jorvy muttered begrudgingly. I had to be, Lyra replied. You don't survive long in the shadows without learning a few tricks. Asher rested near the cockpit, crimson eyes flicking between the two humans. The dragon's presence a constant reminder of what was at stake. Suddenly the radar beeped. Ominous. Lyra's fingers froze. They found us. Jorvy cursed under his breath. How many? 2 ships, Lyra replied, eyes narrowing at the display. Fast ones. Jorvy's jaw clenched. Hold on. The ironclad surged forward, engines roaring as Jorvy, once again prepared for a fight, pushed them to their limit. The pursuing ships closed in fast, weapon systems locking on. Any bright ideas? Jorvy growled. Working on it, Lyra shot back. Asher let out a low growl, wings twitching anxiously. Blaster fire streaked past them, lighting up the darkness. Jorvy swerved, narrowly avoiding the blasts. We won't outrun them forever. Then we don't outrun them, Lyra said suddenly. We outsmart them. Jorvy raised an eyebrow. I'm listening. Lyra's eyes gleamed with a spark of defiance. There's an old defense platform nearby, abandoned, but its auto turrets still work. If we can lure them in. Jorvy grinned. I like it. He veered sharply, heading toward the platform. The pursuing ships followed, unaware of the trap being set. Almost there, Lyra muttered, fingers dancing over the console. Come on! Come on! As they approached the platform, Lyra activated the dormant systems. The ancient turrets whirred to life, targeting the incoming ships. Now, Jorvy shouted. The ironclad dove beneath the platform just as the turrets opened fire. The pursuing ships, caught off guard, were shredded by the onslaught. Jorvy let out a breath of relief. Not bad, kid. Lyra smirked. Told you I could help. Asher let out a triumphant roar, blue flames flickering around its jaws. Jorvy chuckled softly. Looks like we make a good team. But even as they celebrated their narrow escape, Jorvy knew the fight was far from over. The consortium wouldn't stop, and neither would they, because now they had something worth fighting for. Together, the ironclad drifted through the silent void, its battered hulls scarred from countless close calls. Yet its engines still thrummed with determination. Jorvy sat in the pilot's seat, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights, his fingers tapping restlessly against the controls. The weight of what lay ahead pressed down on him like an anchor. But there was no turning back now. Not with Asher's life at stake. Not with Lyra's secrets unraveling faster than he could keep up with. In the dim glow of the cockpit, Lyra worked feverishly at the terminal, her brow furrowed in concentration. The stolen data she carried had revealed more than just consortium trade routes and black market deals. Hidden within the encrypted files was something far more sinister. A list of genetic experiments, failed and forgotten. And at the top of that list was Asher. They weren't just hunting it for its rarity, Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ship. They created it. Jorvi's knuckles whitened as he gripped the console. What? Asher wasn't born, Lyra continued, her voice trembling. It was engineered. The consortium tried to create the perfect predator, blending alien genetics with cybernetic enhancements. But Asher? It wasn't what they wanted. Its albino traits were seen as a defect, a failure, so they abandoned it. Jorvi's mind reeled. He looked over his shoulder at Asher, who lay curled up near the engine room, its crimson eyes watching them both silently. They tortured that kid. For what? Because it didn't fit their perfect little blueprint? Lyra nodded grimly. Now they want it back, to dissect, to replicate, to weaponize. Jorvi's jaw clenched, the anger in his chest burning hotter than a star. Over my dead body. Suddenly, the radar blipped ominously. Lyra's fingers flew over the controls. They found us. Damn it, Jorvi slammed his fist on the console. How? They must have tracked the data, Lyra hissed. I tried to scrub our signal, but it doesn't matter now. Jorvi growled, flipping switches and powering up the ship's defenses. They want a fight? We'll give them one. The ship shuddered as the first blast from the pursuing consortium cruisers grazed their shields. Asher let out a low growl, sensing the danger. Jorvi's eyes hardened. We're not going down without a fight. The ironclad surged forward, weaving through the asteroid field as the consortium ships closed in. Lyra scrambled to reroute power to the shields, while Jorvi pushed the ship to its limits. Asher, feeling the tension, stretched its wings and let out a deafening roar that resonated through the hull. Blaster fire lit up the void like fireworks, each shot narrowly missing the ironclad as Jorvi executed impossible maneuvers. But the consortium ships were faster, more advanced, and relentless. We can't outrun them, Lyra shouted over the alarms. We're not going to outrun them, Jorvi replied, eyes glinting with defiance. We're going to outthink them. He veered sharply, heading towards a derelict space station that floated aimlessly in the drift. The consortium ships followed, unaware of the trap Jorvi was setting. As they entered the station's orbit, Jorvi activated the ship's comms. All right, Asher, he whispered. Time to show him what you got. The cargo bay doors hissed open, and Asher launched into the void, its alabaster scales gleaming under the faint light of distant stars. The consortium ships hesitated momentarily, confused by the sight of a dragon in open space. But confusion quickly turned to panic as Asher unleashed a torrent of blue flames, scorching the lead ship's hull and sending it spiraling out of control. Jorvi seized the moment, firing the ironclad's remaining torpedoes at the second ship. The explosion rippled through the station's orbit, debris scattering in all directions. But one ship remained, larger and more menacing than the rest. Vexar's voice crackled through the comms. You can't win, Jorvi. Hand over the dragon, and I might let you live. Jorvi smirked, eyes glinting with determination. You want the kid? Come and get him. Asher, sensing the challenge, let out a deafening roar and dove straight at Vexar's ship. Jorvi followed close behind, weaving through the debris as blaster fire rained down around them. Lyra, her fingers flying over the controls, rerouted all remaining power to the weapons. Now! Jorvi shouted. Asher unleashed another blast of blue fire, melting through Vexar's shields, while Jorvi fired a concentrated plasma beam at the ship's engines. The combined assault crippled Vexar's ship, sending it careening into the station's wreckage. But it wasn't over. Not yet. Vexar's ship, though damaged, wasn't out of the fight. Its cannon swiveled, locking onto Asher as the young dragon circled back for another attack. Jorvi's heart pounded as he watched the scene unfold, his hands gripping the controls so tightly they ached. Asher, get out of there, he shouted into the comms. But Asher didn't retreat. It dove straight at Vexar's ship, flames licking at the edges of its mouth. The consortium ship fired, and for a moment time slowed to a crawl. Jorvi's breath caught in his throat as Asher twisted midair, narrowly avoiding the blast. The young dragon unleashed a torrent of blue fire, engulfing the ship's weapon systems and rendering them useless. Hell yeah, Jorvi cheered, punching the air. But Vexar wasn't done. The ship's engines flared, propelling it directly at Asher in a desperate attempt to ram the dragon. Jorvi's eyes widened in horror. No, Asher spun, but it was too late. The ship clipped its wing, sending the dragon tumbling through space. Jorvi's heart pounded as he pushed the ironclad forward, weaving through the debris to reach Asher before Vexar could finish the job. Lyra, her voice steady despite the chaos, locked onto Vexar's ship. "Hold him steady." Jorvi nodded, maneuvering into position as Lyra fired a concentrated burst straight into the ship's exposed engine core. The resulting explosion lit up the void, sending shockwaves through the wreckage. But Jorvi had no time to celebrate. He sped toward Asher, who floated limp amidst the debris. His hands trembled as he activated the tractor beam, pulling the dragon into the cargo bay. The moment the door sealed, Jorvi rushed to Asher's side. The dragon's chest rose and fell shallowly, its body trembling from the impact. Jorvi knelt beside it, placing a hand on its head. "Stay with me, kid," he whispered, voice cracking. "You hear me? Stay with me." Asher let out a weak rumble, pressing its head against Jorvi's hand. Lyra appeared at the doorway, breathless but relieved. "We did it," Jorvi nodded, tears welling in his eyes. "Yeah, we did." As the ironclad drifted through the void, battered but unbeaten, Jorvi knew their fight wasn't over. The consortium would come again,